Well, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty it's red hot right now. They're working on what to do about the egregious abuse of the veto authority that the governor has. And they're also, we'll talk about this one tomorrow, they're using the recent Supreme Court decision on affirmative action to file a suit in San Antonio. We'll talk about that coming up on tomorrow's program. But that affirmative action decision is going to pay dividends beyond college admission. Anyway, but let's talk about the veto in Wisconsin. Lucas Vebber is standing by from Wisconsin Institute Hotline to talk about the history of how we got to this place and then what we can do about it. Lucas, I'm going to ask you this first question. I'll just make this statement because a lot of people have said this to me. I thought we dealt with this. I thought, I'm old enough to remember voting on the veto. This wasn't the Vanna White veto. This was the Frankenstein veto. Twice we voted on this, but once in fairly recent memory.
Yeah, that's correct. So the governor's partial veto power has been in place for almost a century here in Wisconsin, a little less than a century. It has been used and abused by governors across the political spectrum many times. The Vanna White veto, where the governor could strike, individual letters from words and pull words together that way, was dealt with via constitutional amendment back in 1990. And then in 2008, largely in response to Governor Doyle, who famously pieced together 20 words from within 752 words in order to raid the transportation fund, the people of Wisconsin responded by amending the Constitution to get rid of the so-called Frankenstein veto. Now, of course, just a couple weeks ago, Governor Evers created his new veto. I guess we could call it the 400-year property tax increase veto. And what we've proposed is some ways that the people of Wisconsin can react to that abuse of power and ensure that no governor can do that again.
All right. So this is just abuse. This is abusing
Absolutely.
the taxpayers. Jim Doyle abused the taxpayers raiding the transportation fund. None of this is, I've heard people say, well, Republican governors do it too. So what? If you're doing this to abuse the taxpayers, then it's appalling. But Evers has in 10 years, I think it's like $57 billion in 10 years. We're going to see our property taxes go up at a time, by the way, when we're likely to hit, maybe even a debt crisis. So first off, is there a chance that can be argued successfully, even in front of a liberal majority Supreme Court in Wisconsin, that was a bridge too far? Is it a bridge too far? Second, how do we, the people, respond?
Yeah, I think to answer your first question, it's certainly possible. We have the Bartlett versus Evers decision, which was a great win just a couple of years ago. But obviously, it's a new court, and they may view things differently. With Bartlett versus Evers, there was agreement that the vetoes in that case were unconstitutional. There was not agreement on why they were unconstitutional. So it's really kind of a question, I think, for the new court. Your second question is, what can people do about it? And the answer there is they can do what the people of Wisconsin have always done, and we can come together in bipartisan fashion and amend the Constitution and say, hey, this isn't what we gave the governor the power to do.
Yeah,
and it's egregious.
We won't be bipartisan. I think the days of bipartisanship, I think that ship has sailed. But we have a majority, and the question is the Republican majority, number one? And they should do this. They should immediately call a special session. As far as I know, actually, there's still a session going on, and begin the process of passing one session of the legislature, a veto to eliminate this authority permanently, so it can never happen again. And don't dink around with it like we did with the Vanna White veto, which gave us the Frankenstein veto, which gave us the endless property tax veto. Just deal with this absurd authority that makes no sense. You should not be able to collapse sentences and numbers to create whole new taxing authority. That should not be something that should ever stand the test of a court. And it might stand the test of this court. So let's just do away with it. Because you know what? We might be able to get it on the ballot for the November 2024 election.
The amendment would have to be adopted by the legislature this term, which ends it goes through next spring, and then it would have to be adopted again subsequtly by the next legislature.
So we couldn't get it until spring of 2024. Okay.
Correct.
So
yeah, 25.
That was my pipe dream. So in the meantime, is there anything that the legislature can do minus the long process to amend the Constitution? And shame on them for not giving us the authority to do this back in 1990, because I bet the people would have voted to eliminate all of the power of this veto back in 1990.
Yeah, I mean, certainly short of litigation, there's going to be no way to challenge the governor's excessive use of this. That's for sure.
Yeah. So now what does it mean in terms of our property taxes? Because what this sounds like it does is potentially price people out of housing in Wisconsin.
It certainly could. I mean, what we see here now with the governor's veto, what happened is that he's increasing the taxing authority on a per pupil basis, for the spending authority rather, on a per pupil basis throughout the state. So the choice before the legislature is either they have to fund all of that and give those districts all that money, which means tax dollars, which means that has to come from someone, i.e. the taxpayers, or they don't fund it, and then local districts can simply raise their property taxes to cover the difference. Either way, the taxpayers are getting dinged here for the next 400 years.
Well, I'll tell you what the Republicans do not want to do is raise taxes, so maybe they punt to the local authorities because, you would say, well, don't we have property tax caps? Well, this is not going to be controlled by a property tax limit. This is going to be additional taxing authority, and we have to pay for it. And it's cumulative. That's something that needs to be understood as well. It's cumulative. It wasn't a big aha gotcha by Tony Evers on the Republicans. It was a big aha gotcha by Tony Evers on people who own property in the state of Wisconsin. And that's more and more every year, the burden of property taxes falls on residential property taxpayers.
Absolutely. And it's a time when we need to be attracting people to come live in Wisconsin. The governor vetoed an income tax cut, which certainly would have made us a more attractive state. And at the same time, decided to raise everybody's property taxes for the next 400 years, which, certainly doesn't look good to me when I'm looking for somewhere to move.
Well, no kidding. So in 10 years, what is the amount? I'm gonna whip out my calculator here. In 10 years, it looks like what?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I can pull it up.
Okay, if you could pull it up. Because I want people to sort of understand just how bananas this is. In 10 years, hang on, I've got it right here. It'll be $3,575 in property tax increases in 10 years. $3,500. And so in the 11th year, it'll be $3,575 plus $325. In the 12th year, it'll be $3,575 plus $325 plus $325. And it goes on like that forever. Forever.
That's right, yeah. Yep, over the next 20-year period, it'll be about $5 billion annually that's going into K-12,
$5 billion. Yes, which is insanity. No, by the way, no strings.
Increase of $57 billion, yeah.
No strings attached. No, you're not going to be able to demand with these dollars that 100% of kids can actually read at grade level. None of that is going to be tied to these increases. We're just going to pay more money just cause.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's where we are. So we have to amend the Constitution, and that's it. Or we have to pray for a victory in court. And this is one of those cases that likely has no, I mean, this is a state case, right, Lucas? It's not going to be something that we can drag into federal court and hope it ever gets before the United States Supreme Court, because it's just state issue. It has no federal impact whatsoever.
When the last constitutional amendment on the partial veto came up in 2008, it was adopted with over 70% of the vote, I think, in Wisconsin. I mean, this is an issue that has crossed party lines for decades, and would hope for more of the same, but I guess you never know.
Well, I tell you something that might help make sure people's attention is on this, is put out an advisory referendum question, a statewide advisory referendum question. Do you think a governor, a Republican or Democrat governor, should ever have this much authority? A single person should ever have this much authority over you. and I bet, and as an advisory question, and I bet you it passes, somewhere in north of 80% of the people would say absolutely not. And remind the Democrats, I would put Republican and Democrat in the question, because in a few months when we stop talking about this, the impetus to begin the process of change may have passed. It's infuriating. Anything else? There's nothing else at this point that can be done, correct? Because all the Republicans were dumb enough to vote for this thing, and Tony Evers is already put it to bed.
Yeah, those are kind of the options before us right now.
Yeah. Okay. So you can't go back and redo the budget, take back your vote. I'm absolutely stunned by this, and none of this money, right? None of this money would be set aside for school choice schools.
That's correct. Yeah, this is just local revenue limit authority for K-12 districts.
Lucas Vebber, thanks very much for joining me on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Good to have you.